The lights in the repair bay flickered as Danny Cole worked late into the station's artificial night cycle. His hands moved with practiced ease over the cracked fuel injector, fingers blackened with engine grease. The silence of Helix 7 suited him just fine. Most of the station's residents were asleep, and Danny preferred it that way. People asked too many questions during the day. At night, there was only the hum of machines and the distant rumble of the station's life support systems. Danny was 34 years old, though the gray streaks in his brown hair made him look older. He had come to this frontier station 5 years ago, running from memories he could not escape. The military had given him medals and commendations after the accident, but they could not give him back his crew. 11 good people, gone because command had ignored his warnings about a faulty reactor. Danny had walked away from his uniform and never looked back. Now he fixed ships, small ones mostly, freighters with bad engines, shuttles with worn-out navigation systems. It was honest work, and it kept his hands busy and his mind quiet. The proximity alarm broke the silence. Danny looked up from his workbench and frowned. His sensors had picked up something small drifting toward the station's outer hull. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked to the control panel, pulling up the scanner display. It was an escape pod, designed by the look of it. The smooth black shell and angular fins were unmistakable. Danny felt his stomach tight. They were not friends of humanity. 20 years ago, there had been a war along the border, brief but bloody. Thousands had died on both sides before the diplomats finally stepped in. Since then, relations had been cold at best. Protocol said he should alert station security. Commander Blake would send a team to investigate, but something made Danny hesitate. The pod was tumbling slowly, no thrust, no course correction. Its emergency beacon was silent. Whoever was inside was either dead or dying. Danny made his decision. He grabbed his pressure suit and headed for the maintenance shuttle bay. The retrieval took less than an hour. Danny guided his small shuttle alongside the drifting pod, locked on with magnetic clamps, and towed it back to his repair bay. He sealed the doors behind him and stood for a long moment, staring at the dark shell of the vessel. He had never seen it up close. Like most humans, he knew them only from news feeds and old war footage. They were tall, scaled, vaguely reptilian. Some called them dragons, though Danny suspected real dragons would have been offended by the comparison. They were proud, ancient, and powerful. They looked down on humans as young and foolish, a species barely worth noticing. Danny popped the pod's hatch. The smell hit him first, blood and burned flesh. He recoiled, then forced himself to look inside. She was curled in the small space, her emerald scales dull and cracked. Her eyes were closed, and for a moment Danny thought she was dead. Then he saw the shallow rise and fall of her chest. She was breathing barely. Danny reached in and carefully lifted her out. She was lighter than he expected, her body thin and wasted. As he laid her on a work table, he saw the full extent of her injuries. Burns covered her arms and legs. Deep cuts ran across her torso, some still seeping dark blood. But the worst damage was to her back. Her wings had been cut, not torn in battle but deliberately severed. The membrane that should have stretched between the long finger bones was gone, leaving only ragged stumps. Danny did not know much about culture, but he knew enough to understand what this meant. She had been punished, cast out. He stood there for a long moment, looking down at her broken body. He could still call security. He could walk away and pretend he had never found her. The smart thing to do was to stay out of business. Getting involved could bring trouble he did not need. But Danny had never been very good at walking away. He pulled out his communicator and called his sister. Cole arrived 20 minutes later, her medical kit in hand and worry written across her face. She was 5 years younger than Danny, with the same brown hair and the same stubborn jaw. Unlike her brother, she had stayed in uniform, serving as a medical officer on Helix 7. She took one look at thee and swore under her breath. Danny explained how he had found her, listened without interruption, her hands already moving as she scanned the alien's vital signs with her portable unit. She said that was in bad shape. Severe dehydration, multiple infections, significant blood loss. Did not know enough about physiology to be sure she could help, but she would try. Danny asked what she needed. Gave him a list of supplies: antibiotics, synthetic blood plasma, regeneration gel. Danny gathered everything she asked for while worked. The night stretched on, cleaned and sealed the wounds, administered fluids, and monitored the failing systems. Twice, the alien's heart stopped. Twice, brought her back. By morning, it was stable. sat back in her chair, exhausted, and looked at her brother. She told him he was insane. She said that if station security found out about this, he would lose his license, maybe his freedom. Harboring an alien without authorization was a serious offense. Danny knew she was right, but he looked at the lying on his work table, her chest rising and falling with each labored breath, and he could not bring himself to regret his choice. Left before the day shift began, making Danny promise to call her if anything changed. Danny locked the repair bay doors and settled into a chair beside his unexpected guest. The woke near midday. Her golden eyes snapped open and she surged upward with a hiss of pain and fear. Danny jumped back, hands raised, showing he was unarmed. She tried to speak, but only a rasping sound came out. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the unfamiliar walls, the human tools, the human standing before her. Danny saw terror in those golden eyes. She expected to die. He moved slowly, picking up a translation pad from his workbench. It was an old model, designed for trade negotiations, but it would have to do. He typed a message and held up the screen for her to see. The words read, "You are safe, I will not hurt you." She stared at the screen, then at him. Her breathing slowed, but the fear did not leave her eyes. Danny typed another message. "My name is Danny. I found your pod. You were dying. I brought you here to help." She read the words and was silent for a long time. Then she reached out with a trembling claw and took the pad from his hands. She typed slowly, unfamiliar with the human interface. Her message appeared on the screen. "Why did you not let me die? I am nothing now." Danny looked at her. He saw the stumps of her wings, the scars on her scales, the emptiness in her eyes. He understood that feeling. He had felt it himself 5 years ago when he walked away from everything he had known. He took the pad back and typed his reply. "Nobody is nothing. Now rest. We will figure this out." She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for deception and finding none. Then, slowly, she lowered herself back down and closed her eyes. Danny sat beside her and waited. He did not know what the future would bring. He did not know if he could truly help her. But for the first time in 5 years, Danny Cole felt like he had a purpose again. The days that followed were strange and quiet. Danny kept his repair bay closed to customers, telling anyone who asked that he was working on a private project. It was not entirely a lie. Keeping the alive had become his full-time work. Her name was. She told him this on the 3rd day, when her translator implant finally accepted the patch Danny had rigged together from spare parts. Her voice through the device was flat and mechanical, but Danny could hear the real sounds beneath it. Low rumbles and sharp clicks that formed a language older than human civilization. Came every evening after her shift, bringing medicine and food. She had done research on biology, reading everything she could find in the station's medical database. It was not much. They kept their secrets well, but was resourceful and was strong. Day by day, the wounds began to heal. Did not speak much at first. She watched Danny work on engines and circuit boards, her golden eyes following his every movement. Sometimes she slept for hours at a time. Sometimes she stared at the wall, lost in thoughts she did not share. Danny did not push her. He understood the need for silence. On the 7th day, asked him a question. She wanted to know why he lived alone in this place, fixing broken machines. There was no judgment in her voice, only curiosity. Danny set down his tools and thought about how to answer. He could have given her the short version, the safe version, but something about her steady gaze made him want to tell the truth. He told her about the military, about his years as an engineer on the carrier ship Valor, about the reactor he had inspected 100 times, the one he had flagged for replacement because the containment seals were failing. Command had ignored his reports. There was a schedule to keep, missions to run. They would fix it at the next port. The next port never came. The reactor blew during a routine jump, and Danny was the only one in the engineering section who survived. He was thrown clear by the initial blast, sealed behind an emergency bulkhead while his crew burned. 11 people. He still remembered all their names. The military called it an accident. They gave Danny a medal for trying to warn them, but Danny could not wear that medal. He could not look at it without seeing the faces of the dead. So he left. He came to Helix 7 and started over. Listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she told him her story. She was 200 years old, young by standards. Her clan was ancient and proud, warriors who had served the sovereignty for generations. had been raised to fight, to honor the old ways, to despise weakness in all its forms. 3 months ago, her unit had intercepted a human supply ship near the border. The crew of 12 was captured and brought before the commander. The order came down from the sovereignty itself. Execute them as a message to humanity. Show them that space was not to be violated. Was chosen to carry out the sentence. It was an honor, a chance to prove her loyalty. She stood before the prisoners with her blade drawn. They were bound and kneeling, unable to fight back. She looked into their eyes and saw fear, but she also saw something else. A young woman among them was holding the hand of an older man beside her. Despite everything, despite knowing they were about to die, she was trying to comfort him. Could not do it. She lowered her blade. That night she disabled the security systems and helped the prisoners escape in a shuttle. She did not know if they survived. She hoped they did. Her actions were discovered within hours. She was brought before High Sovereign himself. The ancient ruler listened to the evidence and pronounced her guilty of treason and cowardice. The sentence was exile. Her wings were cut. Her name was struck from the records. Her clan disowned her. They put her in an escape pod and launched her into the void. She was meant to die alone, forgotten, erased from history. But she did not die. The pod drifted into human space, and a human mechanic pulled her from the darkness. Danny sat in silence after she finished. He did not know what to say. What could anyone say to a story like that? Finally, he spoke. He told her that she was not a coward. Killing unarmed prisoners was not strength. Showing mercy was not weakness. They might see it differently, but humans did not. Looked at him with something like confusion. She said that her people had taught her that humans were brutal and without honor. They said humans killed without reason and conquered without purpose. Danny almost laughed. He told her that humans said the same things about. Both sides had spent so long telling stories about each other that they had forgotten to look at the truth. Considered this, she asked what the truth was. Danny shrugged. He said the truth was that most people, human or just wanted to live their lives in peace. The ones who started wars were usually the ones who never had to fight in them. Something changed in his eyes, a small crack in the wall she had built around herself. She nodded slowly and turned back to watch him work. The days became weeks, grew stronger. She began to help Danny in the shop, her natural heat proving useful for welding and her sharp eyes catching flaws that Danny missed. She learned quickly, her clever claws adapting to human tools with surprising ease. Noticed the change in her brother. She told him he seemed happier, more present. Danny admitted that it felt good to have someone to work alongside. He had been alone for too long. Found purpose in the work. Each repaired engine, each restored system was proof that she could still be useful, that her life still had meaning. But the peace could not last forever. On a cool station evening, arrived with news that made Danny's blood run cold. A diplomatic vessel had requested permission to dock at Helix 7. Commander Blake had approved the request. They would arrive in 2 days. Danny told, she went very still. She recognized the ship's designation. It belonged to her former clan. The delegation was led by a warrior named. He had been her clutch brother, hatched from the same nest, raised together since birth. And he would not be here for diplomacy. Danny asked what she wanted to do, was silent for a long time. She could run, try to find another place to hide, but she was tired of running, and she did not want to leave. Danny made a decision. He told her to stay hidden. He would handle this. Somehow he would find a way. Looked at him, and for the first time since he had found her, she smiled. It was a small thing, just a slight curve of her scaled lips, but it transformed her face. She thanked him, not for saving her life, for believing that her life was worth saving. Danny nodded and went to prepare for the arrival of their enemies. The ship arrived at Helix 7 like a shadow crossing the sun. Danny watched it dock from his repair bay window, its sleek black hull adorned with the crimson markings of a noble clan. The vessel was 3 times the size of anything else in the station's harbor, a reminder of the power the sovereignty commanded. Stood behind him, away from the window where she could not be seen. Her claws clicked nervously against the metal floor. She told Danny that was cunning. He would not come this far without a purpose. He must have tracked her escape pod's trajectory. He knew she was somewhere in this sector. Danny nodded. He told her to stay in the back storage room. He had reinforced the door and disabled the scanner signatures. Unless someone physically searched the space, she would remain hidden. hesitated. She said it felt wrong to hide like prey. Her people would call her a coward. Danny turned to face her. He told her that staying alive was not cowardice. It was strategy. There would be a time to stand and fight, but this was not it. She needed to trust him. After a long moment, retreated to the storage room. Commander Nora Blake called Danny to her office that afternoon. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had run Helix 7 for 15 years and had seen more than her share of diplomatic complications. She told Danny that the delegation had requested a tour of the station's repair facilities. Specifically, they wanted to meet the chief mechanic. The Sovereignty was considering a maintenance contract for some of their older vessels, and they needed to evaluate human capabilities. Danny kept his face neutral. He said he would be happy to show them around. Blake studied him for a moment. She mentioned that there had been some unusual activity in his sector recently, power fluctuations, unauthorized shuttle movements. She asked if there was anything he wanted to tell her. Danny met her gaze without flinching. He said it was just a personal project, nothing to worry about. Blake did not look convinced, but she let it go. She told him to be at the reception hall at 1800 hours, formal dress, best behavior. Danny had never liked formal events. He stood in the corner of the reception hall with a glass of something he was not drinking, watching the move through the crowd. There were 6 of them, all tall and scaled and radiating authority. Human diplomats and station officials clustered around them, making small talk that sounded nervous even from a distance. And then there was. He was larger than the others, his scales a deep blue that was almost black. His eyes were the color of old gold, and they swept across the room like a predator scanning for prey. When those eyes landed on Danny, they stopped. Crossed the room with slow, deliberate steps. The crowd parted before him. He stopped in front of Danny and looked down at the human with open contempt. He said that Danny was the mechanic, the one who worked alone in the outer sectors. Danny nodded. He introduced himself and asked how he could help the Sovereignty. Did not answer the question. Instead, he asked Danny if he had noticed anything unusual in his sector recently. Any debris, any distress signals, any escape pods. Danny felt the weight of the stare. He kept his voice calm. He said he had found some debris a few weeks ago. Looked like an old pod, but there was nothing salvageable. He had filed a report with station security. Eyes narrowed. He said that was interesting. The Sovereignty had lost track of a criminal in this region, a traitor who had fled justice. Any information about her whereabouts would be appreciated. Danny shrugged. He said he had not seen any in his sector, just the usual freighters and cargo ships. Leaned closer. His voice dropped to a low rumble that only Danny could hear. He said he knew the human was lying. He could smell fear beneath the calm mask. He warned Danny that interfering in justice was a grave mistake. Humans who made such mistakes rarely lived to regret them. Danny held his ground. He told that this was a human station. Threats did not carry much weight here. For a moment, something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Then they straightened and stepped back. He said they would speak again soon. The reception ended without further incident, but Danny did not relax. He hurried back to his repair bay, checking over his shoulder every few steps. Was waiting for him in the darkness of the storage room. She asked what had happened. Danny told her everything. She listened with growing tension, her claws flexing against the floor. She said would not give up. He had been sent to find her and bring back proof of her death. Failure was not acceptable to the Sovereignty. As if to prove her words, Danny's proximity sensors chirped a warning. Someone was approaching the repair bay. Multiple contacts, moving quietly through the service corridors. Scouts had sent scouts to search the station. Danny grabbed her arm and led her through a side hatch into the maintenance tunnels. They moved quickly through the cramped passages, scales scraping against the narrow walls. Danny guided them to the hangar where he kept his personal projects. The old freighter sat in the corner of the bay like a sleeping giant. Danny had been restoring it for 3 years, slowly replacing its worn systems with salvaged parts. The hull was solid, and more importantly, it had a hidden compartment built into the cargo hold. A smuggler's space, designed to fool scanners. Danny helped inside and sealed the compartment behind her. He told her to stay silent, no matter what she heard. He returned to his repair bay just as the scouts arrived. There were 3 of them, younger in light armor. They demanded to search his premises. Danny stepped aside and let them work. They searched for over an hour. They scanned every corner, opened every cabinet, checked every storage container. They found old engine parts, broken tools, half-finished projects. They found nothing else. The lead scout reported to by communicator. The target was not here. The bay was clean. Danny watched them leave with a neutral expression. Inside, his heart was pounding. Came to see him the next morning. The stood in the doorway of the repair bay, his massive form blocking the light. He said he knew Danny was hiding something. The human was not clever enough to deceive him forever. He warned Danny that when the truth came out, there would be consequences. For Danny, for anyone who had helped him. Danny told that he was welcome to file a complaint with station security. Until then, he had work to do. Left, but his final words hung in the air like poison. Found Danny sitting alone in his bay that evening. She sat beside him without speaking and took his hand. She said she was scared for him. This was bigger than one person. He was risking everything for a stranger. Danny looked at her. He said was not a stranger, not anymore. She was someone who had shown mercy when her whole world told her not to. She was someone who deserved a chance. If he turned his back on her now, he would be no better than the commanders who had ignored his warnings about the reactor. Squeezed his hand. She said she understood. She did not like it, but she understood. Danny asked her to keep helping, no matter what happened. Nodded, she told him that he was her brother. She would always stand with him. Outside the window, ship sat in the dock like a waiting predator. Danny knew the hunt was not over, but for the first time he felt like he was not facing it alone. The delegation extended its stay at Helix 7, claimed they were still evaluating the maintenance contract, but everyone knew the truth. He was hunting. Danny fell into a careful routine. During the day, he worked on legitimate repairs, keeping his bay open and visible. At night, he brought out of hiding so she could stretch her limbs and breathe fresh, recycled air. They spoke quietly in the darkness, sharing stories and silences. Grew restless. She told Danny that she hated this, hiding like a wounded animal, waiting for the hunters to find her. In her culture, this was the deepest shame. A warrior faced her enemies. She did not cower in the shadows. Danny understood her frustration. He felt it too, but he also knew that rushing into a confrontation would only get them killed. He asked her what she wanted. If she could have anything, any future, what would it look like? Was silent for a long time. She said she did not know. Her whole life had been built around her clan, her duty, her place in the sovereignty. Without those things, she did not know who she was. Danny told her that was exactly how he had felt when he left the military. He had defined himself by his uniform, his rank, his role. When he walked away, he felt like a ghost. It had taken years to build something new. Asked how he had done it. Danny gestured around the repair bay. He said he had found work that mattered to him. He had fixed things. He had made himself useful. Slowly, he had discovered that his identity was not given to him by others. It was something he created for himself. Considered this. She looked at the engines and tools scattered around the bay. She had helped him with several repairs over the past weeks. The work was not glamorous, but there was satisfaction in taking something broken and making it whole again. She asked if there was room for one more mechanic in his shop. Danny smiled. He said he thought there might be. But before that could happen, they needed to deal with, and that meant taking a risk. The next morning, Danny went to Commander Blake's office and told her everything. He told her about finding the escape pod, about injuries and her story, about the human prisoners she had saved, about Hunt and the searches and the threats. Blake listened without interruption. Her face remained unreadable throughout. When Danny finished, she was quiet for a very long time. Then she asked him why. Why risk everything for her? They were not allies. They were barely at peace. Danny told her that had been punished for showing mercy to humans. She had given up everything because she could not bring herself to kill innocent people. If humanity turned its back on her now, what did that say about human values? What kind of people would they be? Blake leaned back in her chair. She said Danny was putting her in an impossible position. The would demands return. Refusing them could damage diplomatic relations. It could even lead to conflict. Danny said he understood, but he asked Blake to consider what message it would send if they handed over a refugee, a woman whose only crime was showing compassion. Blake stood and walked to her window. She stared out at the stars for a long moment. Finally, she turned back. She said she would grant provisional asylum. that would be registered as a resident of Helix 7 under human protection. But Blake warned Danny that there would be consequences, political consequences that might follow them for years. Danny said he could live with that. Blake nodded slowly. She told him to bring to her office. They had paperwork to file. The meeting came 2 hours later. The warrior stood in Blake's office, his scales bristling with barely contained rage. Behind him, his delegation watched in cold silence. Demanded to know the meaning of this insult. He said was a criminal, a traitor to the sovereignty. She belonged to justice. Blake remained calm. She explained that under human law had committed no crime. She had saved human lives. Whatever the considered treason, humanity considered heroism, would remain on Helix 7 as a protected resident. Invoked an old treaty clause. He claimed the sovereignty had the right to reclaim criminals who fled into human space. Blake had anticipated this. She pulled up the original treaty text and read it aloud. The clause applied only to individuals who had committed crimes against both parties. Actions had harmed no humans. Therefore, the clause did not apply. His golden eyes burned with fury. He said this was a manipulation of words, a trick. Blake smiled thinly. She said it was called diplomacy. Perhaps they should try it sometime. For a moment Danny thought might attack. This clause flexed and a low growl rumbled in his throat, but then he stepped back. He was outnumbered and far from reinforcement. Turned to Danny. His voice was cold and hard as stone. He said Danny had made an enemy of the sovereignty. He had shamed his clan and their justice. When returned, it would not be for diplomacy. It would be for blood. Danny met his gaze without flinching. He told that he would be waiting. The delegation departed within the hour. Danny watched their ship pull away from the dock and disappear into the darkness between stars. Found him at the observation window. She stood beside him and followed his gaze. She asked if he was worried. Danny admitted that he was not the type to forgive or forget. There would be trouble ahead. Asked if it was worth it. Danny turned and looked through the glass into the repair bay below. Was there, working on the engine of a small shuttle. Her movements were confident now, her claws moving with practiced skill. One of the station workers was beside her, asking questions about engineering, was answering patiently, her translator rendering her words in a steady voice. She looked up and saw Danny watching. She raised a claw in greeting. The station worker waved too. Danny smiled. He told that yes, it was worth it. Over the following weeks became a familiar presence on Helix 7. Not everyone accepted her at first. There were suspicious looks and whispered comments, but won people over the same way Danny had. She worked hard. She helped anyone who asked. She never complained. Spent evenings teaching about human customs and medicine. Was fascinated by human healing practices, so different from her own culture's emphasis on strength and endurance. She learned to appreciate kindness as a form of power. Danny taught her the technical side of the business. His natural abilities made her an exceptional mechanic. Her heat tolerance let her work with equipment that would burn human hands. Her keen eyes caught microscopic flaws in circuitry. Her precise claws could reach spaces too tight for human fingers. For the first time since her exile, felt like she belonged somewhere. But neither she nor Danny forgot's final words. They would return, and when he did, they would need to be ready. The warning came on a cold station morning. Long-range sensors detected a warship entering the sector. Not a diplomatic vessel this time. A true warship, bristling with weapons and carrying the banner of High Sovereign himself. Commander Blake called an emergency meeting. The council chamber was tense as she briefed the senior staff. They had sent a formal communication. High Sovereign demanded the immediate surrender of the exile. Refusal would be considered an act of war. The room erupted in argument. Some demanded that be turned over. One person was not worth the destruction of the entire station. Others insisted that surrendering a protected resident would destroy human credibility forever. The debate raged back and forth. Danny sat in silence, watching the warship grow larger on the sensor display. Beside him, gripped his arm. When the shouting finally died down, Danny stood. He asked for permission to speak. Blake nodded. Danny told them that this was his responsibility. He had brought here. He had asked for her asylum. If anyone should face the consequences, it should be him. Stepped forward from the corner where she had been waiting. Her voice through the translator was calm and steady. She said she would not let Danny sacrifice himself for her. If the wanted her, she would go. Danny told her to wait. He had an idea. For weeks, he had been studying the schematics of vessels, had helped him understand their engineering, their strengths and weaknesses. He had found something interesting in the design of the warship's reactor shielding, a flaw that even they did not know about. If they could get close enough, they could disable the ship without destroying it. No deaths, no war, just a demonstration of human ingenuity. Blake asked how they would get close. The warship would destroy any approaching vessel. Danny said there was one exception. Diplomatic envoys were protected under the old treaties. If they approached under a flag of negotiation, they could not fire without violating their own sacred laws. It was a risk, might ignore the treaties, but Danny believed that the old sovereign was too proud to break tradition in front of his own warriors. Honor mattered more than victory to the. Blake considered the plan. She asked who would pilot the shuttle. Stepped forward, she said it would be her. This was her fight. Danny said he was going too. He was not letting her face this alone. Looked at her brother with fear in her eyes, but she did not try to stop him. She only hugged him tight and told him to come back. The shuttle launched within the hour. Danny sat at the engineering controls while piloted. The warship loomed before them, a mountain of black metal against the stars. A voice crackled over the communication system. It was. He demanded to know what they were doing. Responded. She announced herself by her true name and claimed the right of diplomatic approach. Under the old laws, they must be granted audience with High Sovereign. There was a long silence. Then's voice returned, cold with hatred. He told them to approach, but he warned that no trick would save them. Danny worked quickly as the shuttle drew closer. His device was simple but effective. An electromagnetic pulse generator tuned to the exact frequency of the warship's reactor shielding. When activated, it would overload the containment systems and force an emergency shutdown. The ship would lose power without suffering permanent damage. The shuttle docked at the warship's main hangar. Warriors surrounded them as they stepped out, weapons raised. Was waiting. His eyes burned with cold fire as he looked at. He called her a disgrace, a coward who had fled justice and hidden behind humans. He said her death would cleanse the shame she had brought upon their clan. Did not flinch. She said she had not come to hide. She had come to invoke the ancient right of honor combat. A murmur ran through the gathered warriors. The right was old, rarely used in modern times, but it was still law. If won, her exile would be lifted and her actions vindicated. If she lost, she would die with her honor restored. Laughed. He told her she was pathetic. With her wings clipped and her body weakened, she had no chance against a true warrior. But it was not who would fight her. A new voice echoed through the hangar. High Sovereign himself emerged from the shadows. He was ancient, his scales faded to gray, but his eyes were sharp as blades. He said that had challenged the judgment of the sovereignty. Therefore, she would face the sovereign himself. Danny's blood ran cold, was a legend. He had ruled for 3,000 years. His skill in combat was unmatched. Turned to Danny. For a moment her calm mask slipped. He saw fear in her golden eyes, but also determination. She told him to wait for her signal. Then she walked into the combat circle. The duel began. Was fast despite his age. His claws slashed through the air in patterns that could barely follow. She dodged and weaved, using her smaller size to stay ahead of his attacks, but she could not avoid them forever. The first blow caught her across the shoulder. Dark blood spattered the floor. The second tore a gash across her side, stumbled and pressed his advantage. Danny watched helplessly from the edge of the circle. His hand rested on the pulse device hidden beneath his jacket. He could end this now, disable the ship and buy them time to escape. But had asked him to wait. She needed to do this herself. Drove to her knees. He stood over her, claws raised for the killing blow. He called her weak. He said she had proven that mercy was a disease that destroyed those who carried it. Looked up at him. Blood ran down her face, but her eyes were clear. She said he was wrong. Mercy was not weakness. It took more strength to spare a life than to take one. The humans had taught her that. She moved faster than Danny had ever seen her move. She ducked under strike and drove her own claws into the gap between his chest plates. The old sovereign roared in pain and staggered back. Did not hesitate. She pressed her attack, striking again and again, tried to defend himself but was everywhere at once. Years of desperation had made her faster, more ruthless. With a final blow, she swept his legs from under him, crashed to the floor and pinned him there, her claws at his throat. The hangar was silent. Every watched in disbelief. The High Sovereign, undefeated for 3,000 years, lay at the mercy of an exile. Closed his eyes, he told her to finish it. Held him there for a long moment, then she her claws and stepped back. She said she had shown mercy once before and been punished for it. But the humans had taught her that mercy was not something to be ashamed of. It was the highest form of strength. She would not kill. She would let him live with the knowledge that an exile had defeated him through the very quality he despised. Opened his eyes. For the first time, Danny saw something other than pride in them. It might have been shame, or it might have been respect. The High Sovereign rose slowly. By the ancient law he pronounced exile lifted. Her name was restored. Her honor was reclaimed. Then he asked what she would do now. Would she return to her clan? Shook her head. She said she had found a new clan among the humans. She chose to stay with them. Was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. He said perhaps there was something that could learn from humanity after all. The warship, Danny, and returned to Helix 7 as heroes. The celebration lasted for days. People who had once avoided now cheered her name. Commander Blake personally welcomed her as a permanent resident of the station. Hugged her brother so hard that Danny thought his ribs might crack. She told him she was proud of him. Danny told her he could not have done it without her. In the quiet after the celebration, Danny and stood together in the repair bay. The workbenches were cluttered with projects waiting to be finished. The old freighter sat in the corner, still needing its final restoration. Asked what came next. Danny shrugged. He said they had ships to fix, customers to help, a life to build. Smiled. She said that sounded good to her. Danny walked to the front of the shop and hung a new sign above the door. The letters were freshly painted in bright colors. Coal and repairs and restoration, all species welcome. Stood beside him and read the words. She asked if he really meant it. Danny looked at her, at the scars on her scales and the hope in her golden eyes. He thought about everything they had been through and everything that lay ahead. He told her that he had never meant anything more in his life. Together they walked back into the shop. There was work to be done.